Thanks for clicking on the video. Like, subscribe, and share if you find this useful or interesting. So last time we finally made a fully blended solid. And let's see, I'm going to look at the... I've done a little bit more work on this one. And here I took, these are all the objects we had last time grouped together. And then this version here, instead of using the preview triangles here, I have replaced these with filling surfaces from the surface workbench. And when we look at it at this level with all the lines mostly straight, you can't see too much of a difference between the two. There's 4 defects in these guys, but you can't really see them easily. But when you put more curvature on the object, then you start seeing them more. So I'm going to take this curve and make it really big. Hit OK. Okay, so now I have a lot of curvature in the middle. And you can see on this red model here that the triangles, the default preview triangles that I made by putting a 6x4 grid on this object right here, which we used to create the rounding triangles. When there's a lot of curvature, it doesn't behave so well anymore. And that's why I said this is just a scaffolding piece. The important thing is that it creates a good piece here. And then I replace it with the surface from the filling surface from the surface workbench. And those, even though they were creating extra bumps when I did the test I showed you on the surfboard, now that I've taken charge of the corner itself, replacing just this little piece here tends to work out really well with the filling surface. So here I'm showing, you can see the default here. You can also see it here. And you can see that those are taken care of well by the filling surface. But you still don't want to absorb too much of the surface with blends. What I did on the bottom here is a little bit silly, right? I mean, I'm only keeping this much of the surface and making it really big. But this is a little bit of a caricature, so you can see what the different parts are. And we'll play around a little bit more with this in a minute. I wanted to talk about the structure and the strategy for how you're going to do these blends when you're doing this rolling blend business with one really large radius and one small radius. The one we made is this one. I've got this group here. I call these the parallel loops. You do the full loop on one side and the full loop on the other one, so you could make it like flat, like a board like this one. You can make it long like this one, which is kind of like a stick almost. Or you could do the middle dimension here. But you can also snake your way all around by reversing when you get to the other side. So here you get 2 characteristic shapes you could get here if you do that. But that's not all. You can do one entire face, like in the case of the parallel one. But just because you've made an entire face doesn't mean that you have to do the other side. You could just finish the other loop. But now you need to think carefully about the sizes that your blends are going to have, because the blends have to maintain the same proportion of the surface all along the way. But it does give you a bunch of choices, and different choices result in very different shapes. Right? Like these 3 have something in common, but these guys here can start to get pretty wild. So it's just to give you ideas of the kind of things you can do. Now, keep in mind in these, this is just representing these are just normal fillets on a block from the part workbench. But it was just easier to whip up these images to create these objects so I could show you the structures that I'm talking about. But these, right now, in the case of our object here, with the 2 sections here, that would mean that there's a division in the middle here, but there could also be a division down the middle here. This is a 1 1 by 1 by 2. And here I'm showing a 1 by 1 by 1, but it could be any number of surfaces along each edge. All right. This is just to give you an idea of the kind of possibilities with this type of structure. Possibilities, but also constraints. When you put this really large fillet here, it has to chase all around the edge, at least for the time being. But if we look back on this one, so you see the result I get with when I finally swap in the filling surface for the maximum quality that I know how to make with this system, I get a pretty good result. But it's still a good idea to limit the size of these things and to not do that. Don't absorb the entire surface. I did on this model so you could see that you do have range on where you put these things, but really you should be using the curves to sculpt as much as possible, and all of these blends should be, in the end, basically as small as they can be and still get the job done. So when you're working on this, you have constraints, right? So you have constraints on your curve that you're not allowed to completely align them. You have to maintain a little bit of angle between them. Talked about that when we were sculpting the nose of the surfboard. So that leaves a little bit of angle, and you need the blend. But the blend can't do everything. So your basic curves can't be completely smooth, and your blends can't absorb everything. You need to balance both of those things. And that still leaves a lot of possibilities. Let's play around some more with these curves a little here, just for fun. See what we can get away with. For example, how about I reverse these guys into the center? I'm going to do a section cut. Got this guy right here. Where's its dimension? Right here. Here's its dimension. It's at 2 on the outside. I'm going to delete that. Stick it inside. Point, line, type D, dimension, 20 to the inside. What does that do? Still working. So I've squeezed it a little bit on the inside. Maybe that's why it's bulging on top. And it's working okay over here. All the blends on this side are fine because remember, all the red corners that potentially cause problems are only on the top and bottom. But it's handling it fine. And yeah, so that's what I want to show. I want to show what happens when oh, by the way, let me show you using the curves workbench how complicated the surface ends up being. But it's worth it. It's worth it because it's relatively flat. You can see when I look at this grid here that it doesn't have crazy spikes like mountains when it's trying to accommodate the job we're giving it, because this area here is very similar to simply being a part of this surface, which is very simple and well behaved. And you can see that this is the simplest silk surface, slightly more complicated silk surface, currently one of the most complicated silk surfaces if you ignore the starch surfaces. And then when I finally use the filling surface, I let FreeCAD throw as much firepower on it as it wants, but it doesn't control my design. When I use this filling surface, it's not creating a new feature in my model. It's just replacing a crappy scaffolding piece that I needed in order to define my corner blend. And now that I have my corner blend, I can remove this face, and FreeCAD gives me a good one. All right. And I also want to point out that I like these shapes. I think they're fun to play with. They can give you some ideas on how to strategize all your fillets, but still you should keep in mind to make those fillets / blends of a reasonable size. Do a lot of design. Do most of your design with these curves. Make sure you don't align them at the corner in places where you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to align this one and this one. I could align this one and this one. There's no rule against that. There's not much point to it, though. You might as well use the internal points on here to really control the inside of the surface And if you do that, then you can let a reasonable blend take care of the hard edge. All right, so I'm debating right now whether I'm going to record me doing all of this on the surfboard, but right now my thinking is no. I think I'm just going to do it, create this topology on the surfboard, and then when I've done that, I'll record the fine tuning of those blends on the surfboard. All right, catch you next time.